Rove in 2003, only on Southern Cross 10.
What's got Becker so happy?
Happy.
Happy. Is it Tuesday's happy hour? Or could it just be bubble wrap?
I love bubble wrap because unlike a woman, bubble wrap makes a noise, then it stops.
All new Becker, 7:30 Tuesday on 10.
What do you want to be?
Ten's Late News with Tracey Spicer.
Tonight, the bombardment of Baghdad intensifies after yesterday's suicide bombing that killed 4 Americans. A precision bomb targets Iraqi paramilitaries in the southern city of Basra. And a VIP Aussie barbecue for the families of the men and women on duty in the Gulf. Good evening. On the 11th day of the war, Iraq has warned of more suicide bombings following an attack that killed 4 American Marines. An Iraqi army officer in a taxi blew himself up at a checkpoint in the city of Najaf in the first such attack against Allied forces. Just hours later, the coalition launched another blistering bomb and missile blitz on Baghdad, one of their fiercest yet. A building in the flashpoint city of Basra was also targeted. 200 Iraqi paramilitaries believed to have perished inside. And to the north, under cover of American firepower, Kurdish rebels advanced to within just 20 kilometres of the oil capital, Kirkuk. 10 reporter Jeremy Pudney at the coalition's headquarters in Qatar says Iraq is threatening more of the same against the Allies.
And the Iraqi vice president has warned that we will see more of this style of attack, not only throughout Iraq, but also in the United States. Now, I can tell you that the soldier responsible for this recent suicide attack in his death has been honoured with a promotion and 2 medals have been awarded to him, his family given a significant cash payment. And in a sign of things to come, 2 more Iraqi soldiers have been captured near Basra. They surrendered to forces, telling them they too had been sent on suicide missions but didn't want to die. Targeting more government buildings around Baghdad with laser-guided bombs. And here, a bird's-eye view, blowing up a building said to contain 200 members of Iraq's paramilitary. To the west, US Army Rangers ripping through an Iraqi commando headquarters. 50 prisoners were seized, along with weapons, ammunition, communications and gas masks. Nearby, the last blast from an Iraqi tank. Destroyed by British troops. And taking it to the streets, the door-to-door war, Royal Marine Commandos searching for Saddam's henchmen. This raid thanks to a tip-off, one of those caught a general dressed as a civilian. Out on the field, running for their lives, Iraqi soldiers take to the trenches just before a rocket hits. And more evidence of Iraqi troops deserting their posts, leaving behind weapons and ammunition. As the Allied push continues north to Baghdad, reports from embedded journalists claim food rations and troop numbers are in short supply, a line dismissed by the Pentagon.
There's no pause on the battlefield. Because you see a particular formation not moving on a day does not mean there is a pause on the battlefield.
Something these victims understand all too well. They survived a missile strike on a Baghdad marketplace. 62 died. This man says he'll blow himself up in the middle of the US and kill them the way they killed his innocent children. Jeremy Pudney, 10 News.
And another reminder of the cost of war, with the first of Britain's fallen soldiers sent home to grieving families. Their sombre arrival deliberately low-key.
The realities of war are brought home to British soil. Ten coffins were flown into the Brize Norton Air Force Base, each draped in the Union Jack. 2 were pilots down by US Patriot missiles last week. the rest killed in a helicopter crash in northern Kuwait. In Iraq, the job of retrieving fallen comrades goes on. The city of Nasiriyah has seen the bloodiest battles of this war so far. Marines from the 1st Expeditionary Force recover 9 bodies, 5 still inside the armoured vehicle which was struck by a rocket-propelled grenade last Sunday. The US's own missiles are causing diplomatic dramas. Tomahawks have strayed into Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Here, Turkish peasants respond angrily to a US retrieval team. The Pentagon has suspended their use over Saudi and Turkish airspace.
I believe we've had a total of about 7 Tomahawks not make it to their target, i.e. some sort of mechanical malfunction.
Iraqi television has played footage of Saddam Hussein meeting with generals, this time dressed in a bulky overcoat, perhaps veiling a flak jacket, as the US president hinted at his possible fate.
We expect such war crimes, but we will not excuse them. War criminals will be hunted relentlessly and judged severely.
Meanwhile, a new international poll suggests the majority of people in Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain and the United States feel the UN should have sanctioned military action. The anti-war movement remains vocal, thousands taking to the streets of Boston. But a Washington Post poll today showed 3 out of 4 Americans support the war effort. In the United States, Max Butcher, 10 News.
In the north, Iraqi opposition groups claim government forces have executed dozens of soldiers trying to join Kurdish rebels. With American firepower in support, the Kurdish militia is pushing Iraqi forces back towards the oil centre of Kirkuk.
Figures in a landscape. These are Iraqi soldiers who seem to be checking their defences before the day's bombing starts. It's not long in coming. The Iraqi front line here is taking a real hammering now. And so the Iraqis are pulling back from position after position. The Kurds are moving forward to take over from them, reaching deep into what was Iraqi territory without firing a shot. We arrived just as they were setting their mark on their new positions. They checked out the equipment the Iraqis had hurriedly abandoned. Again, the worrying realization that they seem to be preparing for chemical warfare. The first job was to clear out the Iraqi mines. They dug out dozens of them, and they treat them with cheerful carelessness.
And this, for the time being, is as far as the main body of Kurdish troops wants to go. The Iraqis are about 7 or 8 miles down the road. It's not that the Kurds are afraid of them. They're worried that the Americans might mistake them for Iraqis and attack them. They don't want any friendly fire in this area.
We drove on and came eventually to the furthest point the Kurds had reached. There was a certain amount of tension here. But over the next ridge, we could make out the flares from the Kirkuk oil fields not far away. All in all, it had been a good day for the Kurdish forces.
Intense fighting continues in southern Iraq, where pockets of the Republican Guard are still dug in. But coalition forces are fighting another battle in the area, trying to convince local people they will be safe from Saddam Hussein.
Qasr is a dilapidated little town. At the marketplace, there's not much more than tomatoes, onions, and a lot of flies and opinions. Saddam Hussein is our president, says this woman. We love him, but we're scared of him. In fact, Ali, an anti-Saddam exile returning home with the US Army, says these women don't dare speak out against Saddam Hussein just yet. As part of Army Civil Affairs, Colonel David Blackledge and his team interact with the people.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. How old are you?
They're trying to gain valuable information and their trust, but it's a hard sell. This is Iraq's Shiite heartland, and memories are deep and bitter. They'll not easily forget what they consider America's great betrayal during the Gulf War 12 years ago, when they were encouraged to rise up, only to be left to the brutal mercies of Saddam Hussein. People gather around US soldiers and they tell us they are looking forward to a new Iraq, one without fear of Saddam's reign of terror. I want my freedom, says this man. I don't want food or water. I just want my freedom. The British sent 11 of these Challenger tanks into Basra to crush Saddam's statue in the center. Meantime, a steady stream of civilians continues to leave. It's a portrait of war with thick black smoke billowing from the city they leave behind. Some are surrendering to the British forces, and some of the men want to go back after bringing out their families. And to the question the British ask every day, when will the people rise up? The answer many give us, the day they know Saddam is dead.
Thousands of anti-war protesters in Malaysia have targeted the Australian High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. The activists carried coffins to the front gates of the Australian mission, where riot squads trying to control the crowd scuffled with the protesters and then turned on the water cannon. Police detained a number of people. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak says suicide bombings won't derail the coalition campaign in Iraq. Speaking during a visit to Australia, he predicts Saddam Hussein could be dead or in exile within months.
In the last Gulf War, Iraq fired Scud missiles into Israel from sites in its western desert. That's where Australia's special forces are operating now. They've already destroyed at least one launch facility, and former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak says the SAS mission is vital to his country's defence.
Your own special forces in the western desert will protect Israel against these launching of missiles.
While some analysts claim the larger campaign is stalling, Mr. Barak, also one of Israel's most decorated generals, predicts Baghdad could fall within 2 months.
I believe within 3 weeks from now, American and coalition forces will be well deployed around Baghdad, and then the battle for Baghdad will begin. It might take 5 to 8 weeks.
And he believes Saddam's fate is all but sealed.
And it will end either with a unconditional surrender, a grave with the name of Saddam on it and his body inside, or an exile for him and his entourage.
Just as Israel's the scene of repeated suicide bombings, our troops in Iraq now face that threat. All 2,000 are on high alert for such an attack.
Clearly there'll be some changes in the way business is done to accommodate these kinds of threats.
But the Brigadier agrees with Mr. Barak that the suicide bombings won't derail the campaign. Brad Burke, 10 News.
A top-level show of support for our fighting men and women. The Prime Minister and Governor-General hosting the families of our troops on the front line.
It's the barbecue invitation many would hope to get. Where? Admiralty House. When? On a perfect autumn day. What to bring? Nothing, except your appetite.
I think everybody's enjoying themselves today.
The day was deliberately low on formality, but big on support from the very top.
You got boyfriends there? What are they in?
Maybe it was the promise of only one short speech to interrupt the eating which brought the families of our fighting men and women out in their droves.
To know that nobody here is alone and nobody needs to be alone.
It was apparently the PM's idea to slap on a barbie to give a little back to those who've given so much.
In seeing the Prime Minister here and all the other families and knowing we're part of a community, it's very nice.
Sandy has her big sister Sharon serving her country.
Yeah, she knows that there's a lot of support back here and that we just wanted to come home.
These are some of the latest images of our fighting forces in Iraq, the closest these families can get to their loved ones outside of emails, letters and rare but closely monitored phone calls.
You're courageous and you're strong and you're steadfast, and we salute you.
Also among the families, servicemen and women who'll form a second wave of soldiers, sailors and Air Force personnel who could be bound for the Middle East as soon as 2 weeks' time.
Prepared to go. Unfortunately, my wife and my young daughter is left behind for 6 months.
While others count the days until their loved ones are safely home again.
In the lap of the gods or the government.
Tim Collins, 10 News.
And still to come in 10's late news, new pressure for an end to the Ansett levy. Records fall as spectacular storms batter Perth. And special recognition for a teenager who became a hero at a fatal train smash. You're watching 10's Late News. A convicted sex offender who fled Cambodia 3 weeks before his trial has been arrested on Queensland's Gold Coast. Federal police swooped this morning, arresting 35-year-old Clint Bettridge. The Cambodian government is seeking his extradition after he was tried and sentenced to 10 years jail in his absence for sex offences against young girls. Australia's domestic airfares could soon be $10 cheaper. Federal Cabinet is under pressure from the aviation industry to suspend the controversial Ansett ticket levy when it meets tomorrow. But a last-minute lawsuit against the collapsed airline from a superannuation fund could see the fee brought back. The levy was imposed to recoup the lost entitlements to Ansett staff and has so far raised $210 million. Record rainfall and flash flooding have hit Perth in a night of fierce storms. More than 10,000 homes are without power as residents prepare for another night of wild weather.
Deafening rolls of thunder, spectacular flashes of lightning and driving rain. It seems Perth's long hot summer is finally over. The first storm hit the city at around 9 last night, moving in from the northeast. Then more just kept coming.
We happened to be in a position where we had a northeasterly convergent line, just kept one storm after another feeding over the top of us.
A record 39 millimetres of rain was dumped on the city overnight, making it the wettest day in March since 1971. But apart from minor flooding, the SES reported little damage to homes. On the roads, traffic chaos with at least 40 sets of traffic lights out. But the biggest impact was on our domestic electricity supply.
At the height of the storm, there were 70,000 homes around Perth without power from at least 1,000 separate lightning strikes.
And when the storms returned at midday, the lightning continued to wreak havoc on power lines. Pepita Bullock, 10 News.
A 70-year-old man has been charged over the murder of another tenant of a Melbourne boarding house. The 39-year-old victim was stabbed several times during an argument late last night. He was rushed to hospital but died on arrival. Richard Barry Turner has been charged with murder and remanded in custody to appear before Melbourne Magistrates Court in the morning. Air safety investigators are at the scene of a light helicopter crash south of Adelaide in which 2 men died. They say it's too early to speculate on the cause, but witnesses saw the Perspex canopy blow out of the chopper shortly before it crashed.
The investigation will probably take several weeks and the report may be issued in a few months' time.
Police are also preparing a report for the coroner. A special award for an Adelaide teenager who helped in the aftermath of a fatal train crash. 4 people died when the GAN hit a bus trapped at a level crossing last October. 17-year-old Mark GURD not only alerted police and ambulance, but helped calm the injured and put out a car fire. He was presented with a Scouts Commendation by South Australian Governor Marjorie Jackson.
I got to put into practice what I've learned throughout my life in scouting, and all the other times that I've actually had the opportunity to do something for others, this was the culmination of that.
Still ahead in 10's Late News, more warnings to travellers about the new flu-like virus. Adventurer Simon Chalk pressing on despite rough weather. Then in sports tonight, Bulldog star Chris Grant set to miss the rest of the AFL season.
That's not a good sign for Bulldog fans with Grant.